All right, let's just dive right in. Welcome to today's explainer, where we're gonna completely flip the script on how you think about building wealth. Because look, we've all been sold this massive illusion, right? That financial success is all about having a sky-high IQ or mastering some wildly complex spreadsheets. But actually, scratch that. It's a behavioral game. It's a psychological soft skill, and it's a game that even some of the absolute smartest people on planet Earth fail at miserably. So today, we're gonna break down exactly why wealth is not just about intelligence and uncover the hidden rules that really dictate who actually gets to keep their money. Okay, 2,813,503. Why am I hitting you with this massive number right out of the gate? Well, that is the exact number of Americans who passed away in the year 2014. And here's the crazy part. Out of those nearly 3 million people, fewer than 4,000 of them possessed a net worth of over $8 million at the time of their death. That's an incredibly, impossibly exclusive club. But who actually makes it into that tiny, tiny fraction? The answer is absolutely going to surprise you.
Let's get into part one. Un cuento de dos inversores, a tale of two investors.
I want you to picture this. On one hand, we've got Ronald Reed. Ronald was born in rural Vermont. He was actually the first in his family to even graduate high school, and he had to hitchhike to campus every single day. He lived a super quiet life. He fixed cars at a local gas station for 25 years, he swept floors at JCPenney for 17 years, and he bought a really modest 2-bedroom house for 12 grand. His main hobby? Chopping firewood. Now contrast Ronald with Richard Fuscone. Richard was a hyper-educated, totally elite Wall Street executive. The guy had a Harvard MBA, became a wildly successful executive at Merrill Lynch, and was constantly praised for his brilliant business savvy. He even made a major business magazine's famous 40 Under 40 list. We are talking about two completely different men, from totally different universes when it comes to background and education.
But here is the absolute mind-blowing twist. When our humble rural janitor Ronald Reed died in 2014, he was actually one of those rare 4,000 people we just talked about. He died with a net worth of over $8 million. No way, right? There was no secret lottery win here, no massive hidden inheritance. He literally just saved what little he could. He put it into blue chip stocks and he just waited. For decades. In his will, he left $2 million to his stepchildren and more than $6 million to his local hospital and library. Just incredible. Meanwhile, in stark contrast, just months before Ronald's death was making international headlines, Richard Fuscone, our Harvard-educated financial genius, completely collapsed. He had borrowed heavily to expand this massive 18,000-square-foot mega mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. We're talking 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 pools, 7 garages. Just maintaining this estate cost him over 90 grand a month. So, when the 2008 financial crisis hit, his huge debts and illiquid assets just turned his finances to absolute dust. He ended up totally bankrupt. He actually stood before a bankruptcy judge and stated he had zero income, and that mega mansion was sold off in a foreclosure auction for 75% less than its insurance value.
So what does this all mean? The direct, brutal truth here is simply this. Ronald Reed was patient and Richard Fuscone was greedy. That's it. That one behavioral difference completely eclipsed the massive education and experience gap between them. It wasn't about the fancy degrees on Richard's wall. It was entirely about the psychology inside their heads.
And this brings up a huge, glaring question that we really need to ask ourselves. In what other industry on planet Earth does someone with literally zero college education, zero formal training, and zero professional connections legally and systematically destroy a seasoned top-tier professional? Seriously, try to think of even one other field where that happens.
Which brings us to part 2. Una industria muy singular, a very unique industry.
Just think about physics or medicine for a second. You would never, ever let a part-time gas station attendant perform your open-heart surgery, right? You'd never see an amateur design a skyscraper that somehow ends up fundamentally superior to one built by trained architects. When a bridge collapses, engineers can tell you exactly why. Because physics isn't controversial.
It's guided by super strict, unbreakable laws. But finance, investing, that operates on a completely different plane of reality. Finance is guided by human behavior, by our messy emotions, and by history. And because of that, it's entirely possible for completely untrained amateurs to win the game and for highly trained, brilliant experts to spectacularly fail. And this just perfectly illustrates the big revelation of today's explainer. Wealth is not a hard science. Doing well with money is actually a soft skill. It's an emotional, psychological practice where how you behave is fundamentally, absolutely more important than what you technically know.
Moving into section 3 now, La Psicología del Dinero, the psychology of money. Think about the rigid math we're all constantly taught growing up. The financial industry tells us to calculate our precise cost of capital. We get these really strict, inflexible rules like you must save exactly 10% of your salary, or you have to maintain a strict 6-month emergency fund. We're taught all about the historical correlations of interest rates. But here's the massive flaw in all of that. Knowing the exact math does absolutely nothing to help you control your emotions when a very real market panic hits. Knowing what to do on paper doesn't tell you a single thing about what's going to happen inside your head when you actually try to do it. Okay, get this. Let me share a rapid-fire story straight from our source text that proves this point beautifully. There was this brilliant tech executive, a guy who literally patented a key Wi-Fi router component in his 20s and sold multiple startups. Absolute genius, right? But his relationship with money was this weird, toxic mix of insecurity and just childish stupidity. He used to carry around inches-thick stacks of $100 bills just to show off. One day, he hands a colleague thousands of dollars in cash, tells him to go buy these $1,000 gold coins. Then, he and his friends head down to a pier over the Pacific Ocean, and they literally skipped these $1,000 gold coins into the water like stones, just laughing to see who could throw them the furthest, just for fun. A few days later, he breaks a $500 lamp at a fancy hotel, and when the manager confronts him, he just peels off $5,000 in cash, hands it over, and says, "Now get out of my face." So, you're probably wondering, how long did this guy's wealth last? Well, the answer is not long at all. He eventually went completely broke because raw textbook intelligence simply cannot fix financial stupidity. I love this powerful thought from Voltaire. History never repeats itself, man always does. It just cements everything we've been talking about. Market crashes, massive debt bubbles, sweeping bankruptcies. These things aren't caused by Excel spreadsheets breaking down. They are caused by human greed, human insecurity, and wild optimism just repeating itself over and over again. Which brings us to our final section today, Nadia está loco. No one is crazy. Look, people do absolutely crazy things with their money. We just saw that. But nobody is actually crazy. You see, our financial worldview is deeply, deeply anchored by our own tiny micro-experiences. Think about someone who grew up in severe poverty, or maybe lived through the Great Depression. The way they view risk and reward is basically scarred into their psyche. Now contrast that person with, say, the son of a wealthy banker who grew up during the booming 1990s tech economy. You could give those two people the exact same piece of financial advice today, and they are going to react in totally opposite ways. Because the lessons you learn firsthand out there in the real world are just infinitely more persuasive than anything you learn secondhand.
To put that into perspective, look at this. That tiny, practically invisible sliver, 0.000001%, that represents your personal financial experience in the grand, sweeping timeline of humanity. The massive remaining chunk, that represents the rest of the world's incredibly complex, chaotic economic events. Your personal experience is literally microscopic.
But wait, here's the kicker. Despite being so microscopic, that tiny, tiny fraction of personal experience actually dictates a massive 80% of how you believe the world works. That tiny sliver of lived experience is the heavy anchor for practically all of your beliefs, your financial goals, and your forecasts for the future.
So what's the real takeaway here? We aren't really any smarter or dumber than each other. We are just acting on entirely different histories. When you see someone making a money move that looks utterly, completely insane to you, they're probably just faithfully executing the deeply personal, really persuasive lessons they learned firsthand in their own life. It makes perfect sense to them.
So I'm going to leave you with a provocative question today, and I really want you to audit your own life with this one. Are you actually building your wealth based on effective behaviors and a real understanding of risk? Or are you just blindly repeating the unexamined history of your specific narrow life experience? Because I promise you, if you can recognize that financial success is a soft skill of patience and behavior rather than just raw greed and intelligence, you are literally never going to look at money the same way again. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this gave you a brand new framework for understanding the psychology of your own wealth. Catch you next time.